What's up, everyone? My name is David Warren. Welcome back to yet another video. It has been a little bit since I have done this. Thank you for watching. If you are new to this channel, consider subscribing, give this video a thumbs up. Today, we are talking about my journey to CRNA school and what my stats look like and what my certifications are, etc., everything about how I got into anesthesia school. And I'm sure you're probably wondering, your name is David Warren NP on YouTube. What is the whole CRNA thing about? Excellent question. There are some other videos filmed on that exact topic about why I chose to go to anesthesia school. Consider watching those. I'm not going to talk about why I chose to go to CRNA school in this video, but I am going to talk all about my experience, my stats, how I got in, and we're going to start. I'm going to give you several topic outlines, and then I'm going to kind of delve into each of those a little more in depth. So the first one we're going to talk about is my experience. And if you've looked at going to CRNA school, you know that you have to have critical care experience. That is definitely a given. And you see that I'm a nurse practitioner. So I'm going to start way back at the beginning when I was a bedside nurse. So my first job out of nursing school was at a children's hospital here in Dallas, and I worked in the pediatric ER. I worked there for about 2 years. It's a level 1 trauma center, multiple ICUs. We saw multiple codes, intubations, would run drips every day, just some sick kids that would come in, either trauma or medical. So that was my first job out of school. And that was in the early 2012-ish range is when I started. And I did that for about 2 years, and then I moved on to the adult ER. I worked at a level 1 trauma center here in Dallas in the adult ER, did that for about 2 years, and then I moved on to being a nurse practitioner. And as far as my nurse practitioner experience, I've worked at a trauma center here in Dallas in the emergency department, and I did that for about 2 years as well. And I also worked in the pediatric ER at that same job. There was an adult ER under one roof, and there was a peds ER under that same roof. And it was all combined into one big conglomerate emergency department. And so we would split our shifts between those two locations. After that job, that's when I started traveling. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I've been a travel nurse practitioner. I work up in Alaska, I've worked in California and other miscellaneous states, all in the emergency department. All of my experience has been in emergency medicine. And most recently, over the past few years, I've worked at another hospital in Fort Worth, another trauma center in the emergency department, doing much of the same. And so that's kind of as a little snippet about what my experience looks like. As you can tell, it's all emergency medicine. And I'm sure the question you're wondering is, how did you get into anesthesia school without being an ICU nurse? And that is one thing I want to hit on today, is I've never worked in the ICU. I've not shadowed. I did clinicals in the ICU as a nurse practitioner, as a nursing student. I never held a job in the capacity of being in the ICU. And so that is something that most CRNA programs look for, honestly, is ICU experience. So I'm going to stop you right here and say, if you're wanting to go to CRNA school, go work in the ICU. It's going to be your best bet, honestly. You can do it without ICU experience. I will say that. You can do it without ICU experience, but to get good, solid critical care experience, ICU is probably your best bet. Now, I will say this. My NP experience has drastically made up for my lack of ICU experience as a bedside nurse, and I will explain a little bit about what I mean by that. So had I worked 4 years as a bedside nurse in the emergency department, I would probably go back and work in the ICU to get that critical care experience. CRNA programs are looking for critical care experience, places where you manage vasoactive drips, where you deal with ventilators, where you deal with invasive hemodynamic monitoring, that sort of stuff. You're going to get the majority of that in the ICU. You will get some of that in the ER, but majority, you're going to get that in the ICU, some sort of ICU, cardiac, trauma, SICU, MICU, things like that. So ICU is probably going to be your best bet. However, I will say that I got my critical care experience in the emergency department, working emergency medicine as a nurse practitioner. I did get critical care experience, what little you do as a bedside nurse, but as a provider, over my emergency medicine experience for the last 7 years, on pretty much a daily basis, if not a weekly basis, I'm intubating. So I'm establishing an airway. I am managing ventilators with blood gas. I am starting vasoactive drips, norepi, dobutamine, nitroglycerin, nitroprusside, those sort of medications. And that's really what the anesthesia programs are looking for. They're looking for that critical care experience. Are you managing vents? Are you dealing with invasive hemodynamic monitoring? And as a nurse practitioner, I am. Almost every single day, I'm putting somebody on a vasopressor in the emergency department, or they're getting tubed. I'm doing the intubation, putting them on the ventilator. I'm putting in the central line, putting in the ART line, that sort of thing. I would say the biggest disadvantage I have is like a Swan-Ganz line, so a pulmonary artery catheter. And they don't really use those that frequently, even in the ICU. Now, if you're in cardiac ICU, that's a different story. You're probably seeing that daily. But that's one thing I feel like I'm lacking, is I don't float the bird, as they say. Don't put in the Swan-Ganz line, because we don't really use that in the emergency department. I was trained on that, and I've been trained on how to read those values, what they mean, that sort of stuff. But personally, I haven't used that. Like, I haven't dealt with that. I did as a student, obviously, in the ICU, but as a provider, I'm not putting in a Swan-Ganz in the emergency department. I am putting in a central line. I am putting in an ART line, putting in chest tubes, that sort of thing. The invasive hemodynamic monitoring is really what they're looking for. So that's a little bit about my experience. I feel like I got my critical care experience as a nurse practitioner working in emergency medicine. Now, there are emergency departments out there where emergency medicine providers only work in like a fast track area. And if that's the case, then you're not getting critical care experience. But I feel like my path to critical care looks different than the average applicant to a nurse anesthesia program. And that's because I'm a nurse practitioner and I work in the emergency department, but I am, again, establishing airways, dealing with invasive hemodynamic monitoring, starting medications, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's where I got my critical care experience. So that falls under the experience. If I could give you any advice, I would say if you don't have critical care experience, if you're not dealing with an airway every day, if you're not managing drips every day, putting in lines every day, you need to get somewhere where you can get that done. And that's what the anesthesia programs are looking for. And I will say this as well, most programs will specify that you need ICU experience. However, there are programs that will say other experience considered on a case-by-case basis. And so we will touch on that here in just a little bit. As far as my education, that's the next point. I got my BSN from a local university here in Texas, and my GPA was not that great. 3.47. So I know people that are watching are like, oh my God, I can't believe he's that dumb. 3.47, so not that great. Could have been better, could have been worse. In nursing school, I studied, but I didn't really apply myself that as well as I should have. So, it is what it is. I can't go back and change it. And I'm sure there's some of you maybe who can relate to a mediocre GPA at the best. So my nursing school GPA, 3.47. I went to grad school. I have a master's degree. My MSN GPA is 4.0 through nurse practitioner school. So dual certified. So a little something to be said there, I suppose. But they do look heavily at your GPA. And that's another thing that I want to briefly touch on is most programs say minimum 3.0 GPA, and really it's going to be a little bit above that. Like if you look at the statistics for the people admitted in those programs, usually it's like 3.5 and up. Some programs will take your science GPA into consideration as well, meaning your science-based courses, not your nursing-based courses. So your chemistry, your physics, your biology, your biochemistry, that sort of thing, all of that combined together, they'll take that GPA and that factors into the admission process as well. And so again, that's going to be school specific. This is not like lined up across the board. Not everybody does this, but it is school specific. So just look at that whenever you're applying to the school. Some will say minimum 3.0 science GPA. So take just your science courses, add those up and see what your GPA is. And that might require you to do a little more science work. It really just depends. I would make sure if they specify that they're looking at a science GPA, I would make sure that your science GPA is like there and ready to go. And yeah, so that's a little bit about education. The next point I want to talk about is extra classes that you might have to take. And so again, this is school dependent as well. Some of the programs require that you have a general chemistry course. And so if you're in nursing school, you've probably had some flavor of chemistry. However, they may specify that they want general chemistry. And so usually like the nursing chemistry is not the same as general chemistry. The general chemistry is more like science focused for like medicine and engineers, not like the nursing chemistry. And so again, maybe you had general chemistry. Just look back at your transcript and it will say, literally say general chemistry if that's what you took. So look at the school and look at what they want you to have. Again, if it's general chemistry, make sure you have general chemistry. I will say that most programs now require organic chemistry 1 and 2, or like a year of organic chemistry or a semester of organic chemistry, and then a semester of biochemistry. And so you want to make sure you have those as well. And I think even if you don't, even if the school doesn't require that, it's still a good idea to get those courses because they will help you tremendously in anesthesia school. Because the pharmacology for anesthesia is quite a bit different than it is for like nursing pharmacology or even NP pharmacology. It's geared mostly towards anesthesia. Obviously, you're in CRNA school, so it's super helpful to have OChem 1 and 2. So I would say even if your school doesn't require it, it will boost your science GPA and it will give you a bit of a leg up on others. Maybe there's somebody else out there who has the exact same stats as you and you have organic chemistry 1 and 2. You see who they're going to go with. So get the extra classes. Some schools require physics. This really, excuse me, this really just depends on the school you're applying to. So if you're applying to no-name university in Midwest America and they require organic chemistry 1 and 2 and physics 1 and some other random class, but then there's a university, no-name university in downtown Delaware. Who even lives in Delaware? I've never been to Delaware, so I wouldn't know, but you get my point. Maybe they don't require anything. So look at your school as to where you want to apply, and it will tell you exactly what you need to have. So it's going to be site dependent is what I'm trying to get at. But I think regardless, it will help you if you have organic chemistry under your belt. And I think it will also help you in school in the pharmacology aspect as well. So a little bit about the extra classes. The next thing I want to talk about is the other like miscellaneous items, including your personal statement, GRE, interview, kind of all under one little section here. So the personal statement, and that not all schools require that, but I would say most do. And I would say spend some time on your personal statement because that is really a chance for you to tell your story as to who you are, why they should choose you, and why you should be accepted to the anesthesia program. And the personal statement needs to be unique. It really does. There are people out there who will like edit personal statements, etc. You might look into that if you're not a great writer. But your personal statement really is going to be the thing that sets you apart. And so out of all of the things that I've talked about, I would probably spend the most time on your personal statement, honestly, because that is really a chance for you to like explain who you are, where you came from, why they should choose you. It's really an open book as to why me. And that's a good place to sell yourself. So if you're not a good writer, utilize some resources, but spend some extra time on the personal statement. The GRE. Some schools require it, some don't. Where I'm going to school, they don't require it. So not a huge deal for me, I guess. I say where I'm going to school, where I will be going to school. I'm not enrolled yet, starting soon. You'll hear more about that. The GRE. So if they require it, then take it. If they don't, then don't. It's kind of what it amounts to. I'm not really going to go into in-depth on what to do and how to pass the GRE, how to make good scores, etc. There are other videos on that out there, I'm sure. But if you need the GRE, probably buy a study guide, brush up, and take it. The last point I want to talk about is the interview. The interview, if you've made it past all of these steps and the committee selects your application for an interview, then that's another chance, like your personal statement, that's another chance for you to really wow the committee on your interviewing skills. And most of the interviews consist of they're going to talk about your experience, your education, but they're also going to talk about clinical questions / critical care questions. And so that's really a good chance for you to show who you are. What am I trying to say? Honestly, it is really a good chance for them to see who you are, how you interact under a committee, interview, situation, how you present yourself, things like that. So most of the schools do clinical questions, so they'll ask you something clinical, and if you have the critical care experience, then you shouldn't worry about it because you're probably going to know the answer. It's something you deal with every day. If you don't have critical care experience and you're trying to fudge your way through, then you might brush up on some critical care stuff before you ever get there. So that's a little bit about those things. I also want to touch on certifications. So most schools highly suggest that you have CCRN. I do not have CCRN. I did not take that as a bedside nurse because I didn't work in the ICU, wasn't really interested in getting it. I'm a nurse practitioner now, probably not going to go back and sit for a nursing certification. So that was kind of out of the picture for me. I'm not going to do that. So I looked at schools who didn't require that. I feel like I have good critical care experience. I don't want to go take a CCRN exam because I'm not practicing as a nurse. So, if that's something you're interested in, and certainly if you are a bedside nurse, I feel like that would boost your application. So I would say probably study for it and get it if you don't have CCRN. It would be worth your while if that's something that you feel like you can do and something you want to put in the time to study for. Obviously, that's going to be well before you apply if you're going to do that. So other certifications, most require like ACLS, PALS, BLS, that sort of thing. My certifications are a little bit different. I have ATLS, Advanced Trauma Life Support. It's a trauma class for providers. So not something very many people have unless you're a provider. Most providers aren't going back to CRNA school. So I think that stands out a little bit. I have CEN and CPEN, Certified Emergency Nurse, Certified Pediatric Emergency Nurse. Those were from my nursing days. I didn't take those just to get into anesthesia school. I feel like they're probably irrelevant because most ER nurses don't go to anesthesia school. Let's be real. Mostly it's ICU nurses. So I just had those from my nursing days, but obviously they were on my application. So something that I would disclose to you. Another thing that we can talk about is a little bit more about the school selection process. And I think that really is going to be the deciding factor on what you need in your application, what you need to do, grades, courses, etc., where you want to go to school. And I would start with, actually this point probably should have been at the top. You should start with that. Find out where you want to go. And that's going to depend on a lot of factors for a lot of different people. So maybe for you, you want to go somewhere in your home state, in-state, not a private school, etc. So look into that. Some people are open to anywhere. So I think it depends on where you want to go. Do your research. Find out, if you want to go to No Name University in Illinois, find out what they require. Maybe they require organic chemistry 1 and some random physics class or something. Then you might have to get that under your belt. So I would say look into the school first, find out what they have, what they require, what you need, and then go from there. So wrapping up, that is a little bit about my statistics and my journey into CRNA school. I feel like I've hit most of the topics. However, if I have missed something, comment below. Let me know what questions you have. I would be more than happy to try to address those. I feel like I have hit on most of the required things that anesthesia programs are looking for. You could go more in depth about the interview, and maybe I'll do a video on that at another time. But the interview and the personal statement, I would say, are probably the most important things that you need. Personal statement, spend a little extra time there. Interview, if you get invited to interview, then do your best. It's great to be back on YouTube. It has been a hot minute since I have been here. And over the past, 2 months, I have been up in Alaska working and loving life, enjoying the 60-degree weather, not enjoying the Texas 100-degree weather that I'm back in now. So over the past couple of months, I've been running a lot. I've been averaging about 100 miles per month. And I want to show you a thing that I have started using. It's called the Chirp wheel. Pictures of it here. Chirp, C-H-I-R-P, the Chirp wheel. And it's basically a plexus wheel. It's made of ABS plastic and it's got this foam pad right here. And it really helps with like back pain and running and stretching. That's what I am using it for. And I have found it very helpful, honestly. And it works pretty simply. You are going to lay down and put your back on it, the center of your back on this pad here. It's a foam pad. And as you can see, there's a little indentation right here, and that's where your spine goes. So your spine's not creaking along the plastic part. A little nice indentation for your spine. And then basically you're gonna foam roll your back. And there are multiple different ways to do this. You can put your hands behind your head. You can put your hands on the wheel as you're rolling back. You can also use this for your legs. Pop your leg on there, roll your leg out. Overall, I found it very helpful, especially after I run on a long run, like 10+ miles. This really helps me out to stretch and to feel a little relieved after those long runs. And so I'm gonna put a product link down in the description box. If you're interested in getting one of these, if you run, if you exercise, I think it's worth it. I've enjoyed it so far. It helps my back out a lot when I am using this to stretch and to roll. So I'm gonna give you a discount code below. I'll put that down there as well. It's David10. And I'll put the link down. Check that out if you're interested in something like this, foam roller, plexus wheel for your back. I've enjoyed it. It's been great for me. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far into the video, comment below. Let me know what you think. If you have questions, subscribe, reach out, follow me on Instagram. See you later.